Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, joined here on set with Bruce Barquette and Dinora Smith. A lot of things to talk about, so let's get started right now. I'm getting word that we can jump live any second into day 5 of the Mark Sievers trial. He's the man accused of plotting the heinous murder of his wife, Dr. Teresa Sievers. It's alleged that he hired his friend Curtis Wright Jr. to kill his wife, who then recruited a man named Jimmy Ray Rogers. Now, this should all sound pretty familiar because in a trial that we covered here on the network, Rogers was convicted of second-degree murder. Wright himself took a plea deal for potentially 25 years in prison for second-degree murder in exchange for testifying against Rogers and now Sievers in this trial. In fact, last week, the state called Wright their star witness, who testified about his friendship with the defendant, how they plotted to carry out the hit, and how he and Rogers brutally bludgeoned Sievers to death with hammers. The defense tried to paint Wright as a liar who kept on changing his stories and only implicated Sievers to protect himself. Yesterday, the state presented evidence that was collected by law enforcement and spent a larger portion of the day showing how Rogers was tied to the overall crime. Now, we just saw the first witness of the day who took the stand. This was a friend of Curtis Wright. His name was Jerry Lubinsky, talking about how he lent Curtis Wright a Garmin navigation device, again, that helps tell the story about how they made this trip from Missouri. And now I'm just getting word that we have a new witness on the stand, Laura Bland, who is a convenience store manager. Let's go live.
Recordings maintained.
The DVR system is secured in my office, and it's recorded on the DVR.
And when you use the term secured in your office, what does that mean?
It is only viewable to myself, and it's kept away from the public. It's in a locked office.
And why is it kept away from the public?
To keep the activities on the camera private for Circle K only.
You don't want people going in there and messing with your DVR.
Absolutely.
And does the DVR system contain the time and date?
Yes, it does.
If you ever have to go back and look for specific events in your system, do you sometimes have to search by time and date?
Correct.
And is it important for you to maintain the correct time and date so you can do proper searches?
Absolutely.
And what efforts do you take to make sure that the DVR system in your store is maintained in good working order?
We have a company that comes in and does any type of repairs or adjustments that we need on the system.
Okay. And do you have the ability to view the system and make sure that it's recording?
Yes.
And is it the kind of system where you have to press record whenever you want to record something or someone, or does it just record?
It's automatic.
Okay. Now, the recordings from the DVR system, are those recordings maintained in a normal course of business of your shell station?
Yes.
And do those recordings contain a record of business being conducted on site at the shell station?
Yes.
And are you the custodian of that record?
Yes, I am.
And how long do you keep the recordings?
They're there on the system continuously. You can pull up and burn a disk or a thumb drive. They stay on the system.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as states 72A and B. I'll move on to my next question. And what's the purpose of keeping the video surveillance recordings in a normal course of business?
You want to repeat the question?
What's the purpose of keeping the video surveillance videos, the video surveillance recordings in a normal course of business?
The purpose, in case we need to go back to review anything, any type of incidents, we keep it there for safety, for theft, just for the day-to-day activities.
And that system, does it only monitor customers in the store, or does it also monitor employees?
It monitors customers and employees inside and outside of the store.
And may I approach?
We're going to go ahead and take a brief recess. I'm going to ask that you not talk about the case among yourselves or with anybody else, and we'll be with you very shortly. Please be seated. We're trying to find the exhibit. Obviously, Michelle's not here, and if you would kindly, either side, in the next 5 witnesses, I believe you have 5 today.
Yes.
Will you please give a list to our clerk now of all the exhibits you may be looking at so that we can make sure that we have them available rather than at the last second?
Okay.
We'll take a break, find all the exhibits that we'll need, and then we'll proceed once we have them. Ma'am, you can step down if you'd like, or you can stay there, whatever your pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, so this is something that we've seen before from this judge. He wants to make sure this is on track. He doesn't like this kind of delay. Dinora, we saw this actually, I think during the first week, he actually admonished the attorneys and said, I will keep you here until midnight if we have to. You better pack a dinner because I don't want this going past when we're scheduled to do this. And he really felt that both sides were taking their sweet time, and judges are not too happy about that.
No, they certainly want you to be very highly organized, have everything ready, their fingertips, essentially, keep everything moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bruce, the bigger issue here is with the Circle K Shell station. It's my understanding that this is going to be video camera surveillance footage after the murder. So we're talking about June 29th. The murder happened on June 28th. And I got to tell you, the digital footprint that these two men, Wright and Rogers, left, it's just, this is why committing crimes at this day and age is very different than it was
Much
15,
more difficult than
right?
it was 20 years ago, yes.
But how does this tie into Seavers? Do you think, I know they have to prove their case against what happened to Rogers and Wright, but are they losing the jury a bit?
Not if they're smart, not if they move through this quickly. And what they're doing is, the key to cooperating witnesses, and that's what Wright is detail. Every detail that he can give that can be corroborated will go to his credibility. So every single thing that he says happened, we stopped for gas, we got a burger at McDonald's, we had a slice of pizza, he had to use the whatever it is, they want to be able to prove that up. Because as they go through this, Wright's credibility is the cornerstone of their case. And jurors are impressed with the details that are corroborated, even if they're seemingly irrelevant. And they also want to narrow down the amount of attack or the amount of material that Wright is saying that only Wright knows about. So he's telling a story of what happened, and now they have a convenience clerk manager saying that's exactly what took place.
But Dinora, here's the thing with him, right? I mean, we saw this before in another case that we were just recently covering. This is a guy who said, yeah, I lied to law enforcement to protect myself, protect my co-defendants. If someone gets up there and says, I lied in the course of a murder investigation, why should we believe him now? That's the thing that I struggle with. Why should the jury believe a man who it was so easy for him to lie in the past?
Well, I mean, that's part of what they're struggling with now, which is why they're trying to corroborate every single detail of his journey that they can. I mean, at the time that he was lying, he didn't necessarily think he would be in this scenario, so that's also something else to consider when he's saying, oh, now I'm telling the truth, because he's already entered into this deal.
How convenient. And the idea of a substantial assistance. He has to provide substantial assistance in order to get this. What does that mean?
Well, substantial assistance means he has to provide information and testimony or evidence that substantially assists the government or the prosecutor. And in this case, he's providing the details that are going to end up probably convicting an individual of first-degree murder. That would certainly be substantial assistance. It's not like, hey, I have a tip that somebody's selling some marijuana down at the corner. That might not be. This is, I know somebody that participated in a murder, me, and I know who hired me, the defendant in this case.
Yeah, he's a star witness, but at the end of the day, you think the prosecution was a little bit hesitant putting him back on because he didn't help them secure a first-degree murder conviction against Jimmy Ray Rogers. They got him for second degree, but not first degree. So now they bring him back. Are they a little concerned that he might not be able to convince this jury of Mark Seaver's guilt, especially since Mark Seavers is a principal to this? He wasn't an active participant in the murder, but he's a principal to what happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what do you think, Bruce?
Look, I think what happened with the first trial with Rogers was Rogers got a little bit of a break from the jury. Second-degree murder sounds better than first-degree murder. The truth is he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison either way, and he just won't face the death penalty. But Rogers had the ability to say, I didn't really know what was going to go on. I didn't know if we were going to kill her. I thought we were just going to rob the place. I don't know what happened. Next thing you know, she surprised us, and he struck her, and that was that. Seavers doesn't have that ability. If Seaver gets convicted, he's going down for first-degree murder. And the evidence against him, at least at this stage, looks pretty powerful.
And the death penalty is on the table. We can't forget that. All right, let's take a break. They've taken a break. They're sorting some evidence, getting some exhibits together. The judge is not too happy. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more. Stay tuned.
I'm Dan Abrams, and this is the Law and Crime Network.
His body just went boom.
She did it!
We've been covering 2 trials, of course.
The only 24/7 network with expert legal analysis and gavel-to-gavel live trial coverage.
He kissed me goodbye on the cheek. That was the last time we saw him.
From high-profile cases to the most compelling local trials.
You didn't expect. Let me finish.
We cover the most interesting and important legal news going on across the country.
A verdict in the case of an Ohio woman who took the stand and admitted she shot and killed her military husband.
And our multi-platform brand is resonating. From syndication
With more, we're joined by Law and Crime Network host Jesse Weber.
to our expert analysis.
With me now is Rachel Stockman, editor-in-chief for Law and Crime Network.
This former head prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and host of Law and Crime Network, Bob Bianchi.
On Monday, the Law and Crime Network covering the trial live.
Let's get to the top legal stories of the day with Jesse Weber, attorney and anchor for the Law and Crime Network. So good morning, Jesse.
With dozens of places to watch, we already have tens of millions of minutes viewed per month. And our viewers and readers are engaged, with more than 30,000 comments per month on the site, a bustling chat room, and an average watch time of 30 minutes.
Womanizer, that's fine. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder.
This is Law and Crime.
We got a lot of fascinating cases, as we always do, gavel-to-gavel coverage.
In the fastest growing genre in America, we are uniquely positioned to dominate. This is Law and Crime.
Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Our son Arjun was born with cystic fibrosis. CF is a genetic disease that shortens lives. When the foundation was founded in 1955, children with CF rarely lived long enough to attend kindergarten. Today, thanks to the foundation's groundbreaking research, advocacy, and care, some people with CF are attending college, getting married, and starting families. We've made amazing progress, but until a cure is found for all people with CF, we will not stop. Help us add tomorrows. Visit cff.org today.
Matthew.
I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am. And what you say really does matter to me.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me, and they make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for preparing me for what's ahead.
Talk. They hear you.
Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. We're waiting to jump live once again into the Mark Sievers trial. Right now, they're getting some exhibits gathered together for this witness. And as we wait to go live, let's start right now with some testimony from yesterday. Here's an employee of Teresa's who described when Dr. Teresa Sievers didn't show up for work.
Did she have patient visits scheduled for Monday, June 29th?
Yes, sir.
What time was her first visit scheduled for?
9 a.m.
And was it normal for Dr. Sievers to have visits scheduled at 9 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And did she make those 9 a.m. visits or 9 a.m. Appointments?
Yes.
Did she make this 9 a.m. appointment on June 29th?
No, sir.
And was it normal for her to miss an appointment like that?
No, sir.
When she missed the appointment, what did you do?
I tried calling her.
And when you tried calling her, does she have like a cell phone or a house phone you were trying to call her on?
Cell phone.
Her cell phone? Did you get a hold of her on her cell phone?
No, sir.
To make contact with Dr. Sievers, what did you do?
I called Mark Sievers.
And the same gentleman with the pink tie you identified earlier?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to get a hold of Mr. Sievers?
Via text.
And when you got a hold of him, did you tell him that Dr. Sievers hadn't arrived at work yet?
Correct.
And did he respond?
Yes.
And how did he respond?
Text.
And what was his response?
That he could not get a hold of Dr. Sievers either.
Okay, Dinora, for the people who are, advocating for Mark Sievers, maybe that he's innocent, his defense attorneys, how do you argue away the fact that the timing of this? So she's murdered when she's alone. How convenient, the kids and Mark are not there. And then he calls her good friend to check up on her, and he's the one who discovers the body. He plays the role of the concerned husband, but is he playing it a little too well? Is everything a little too convenient? As a defense attorney, how would you try to say to the jury, I know this doesn't look great, but you have to think about this? What would you do?
Sure. Well, you would certainly try to paint him as a concerned husband who thinks that she hasn't shown up to work, wants somebody to check on them, that he trusts someone that she works with. And just paint him as a doting, concerned husband.
And what do you think, Bruce, about the motive here? The idea that he killed her, they were having problems, he was worried in the divorce she would take the kids away. Does that sit with you?
Murders between spouses is fairly common, so it's perfectly consistent with experience. It's not inconceivable that somebody in the midst of a divorce who's worried about the custody of their children would engage in conduct like this, that would murder their spouse. It's happened before. I think the defense needs to focus on how he reacted to finding out that his wife had been murdered. That initial reaction, the people around there, is critically important.
Well, let's not forget, when we heard from the other day, the doctor that found her body, he first calls Mark Sievers, not 911. He first calls Mark Sievers and says, "Where are the girls?" And he says, "Are the girls coming home?" No, because he wanted to make sure that the girls wouldn't come and see their mother dead on the floor. And he says, "Mark, you have to come home." And Mark Sievers doesn't even ask why. That's a problem. That's a problem. Now, again, we're waiting to jump live. Could start any second. I want to go back to some more testimony. We heard a lot about Jimmy Ray Rogers yesterday, and one of the things that came out yesterday, as well as in his own trial, is the idea that this was a guy who was pretty skilled in cleaning things up and how not to leave a contaminated area. So let's play the testimony of Jeffrey Conway. This is Jimmy Rogers' former supervisor.
Are there specific types of suits that the employees wear while they're working in the plant?
Yes, there are.
And what kind of suits are those?
There are actually two types of jumpsuits that Doe Run provides. One jumpsuit or coveralls is an acid resistant, which is worn on the side of the plant where they recycle the batteries. There's also a type of coveralls that's flame resistant. Those are worn on the refinery side of the plant.
And are these suits required to be worn by employees?
Yes, sir, they are.
How do they get the suits?
Doe Run issues the suits as you come into or getting ready to go into the plant. There is a area where you can get clean uniforms to put on.
And how many, is there I guess a daily allotment or a daily quota of suits that an employee can get?
No, sir.
Why not?
Your change anytime you are contaminated or dirty or feel like that you're dirty enough that you need to change into a clean pair of coveralls. It's recommended you do so.
So if I was working in the plant and I got some battery acid on my sleeve, it's a good idea to change that suit
You bet.
immediately?
Immediately, yes.
What happens to the suits after the employees change out of them?
They are placed in a special bin for dirty coveralls.
And then are the suits discarded, burned, cleaned?
They are sent out to an outside contractor to be cleaned, sterilized, and sent back to the plant to be used again.
Again, all to show that Jimmy Ray Rogers knew how to clean up everything. All right, we're going to jump live right now. This is Laura Bland, the convenience store manager. It was remember, what the prosecution is trying to do is establish that Rogers and Wright, during their whole trip, they made different stops, and one of them was at a Circle K Shell station. I think this is in Bushnell, Florida. Let's go back live.
The native format video that you provided?
Yes.
Your DVR system, when it makes when it puts out a video, does it put it out in a specific format?
Yes.
And then the disc contains the same video in a different format?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are the flash drive and the disc true and accurate representations of the video that you provided to the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, they are.
And the video was maintained in the normal course of business of your Shell station?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state would admit what's been previously marked as 72A and B in evidence of 72A and B. No objection, Your Honor.
Show them admitted.
May I publish?
You may.
Okay, for the record, publishing states 72B, playing the file labeled Shell Front Door 1.
This is pretty incredible what you're watching here. If we believe the timeline set up by the state that Teresa Sievers was killed on June 28th at around or after 11:15 p.m., this is the next day at 2:53 a.m. at this kind of Circle K Shell gas station in Bushnell, Florida. So as we watch them enter, You have to imagine these are the two people that murdered a woman only several hours earlier. Bruce, what's your take on this? I mean, this is pretty incredible to watch. And this obviously, we hope, the jury, this is the first time they've seen this. We don't want them looking anything up about the case. But this is pretty impactful.
Well, 2 words the jury's going to take from this: cold-blooded. You know that these 2 individuals killed a woman in her home 3 hours before this, and they're walking in like it's another Sunday afternoon at the park.
What a wonderful trip that they took from Missouri to Florida. And Dinora, here's the thing. You tell me, is it worse to be the person who actually commits the murder and hammers her to death, or the person who set everything in motion, the person who ordered this? And I tell you why. Because let's not forget that based upon what we heard in the last trial with Jimmy Ray Rogers, they weren't able to find him guilty of first-degree murder but second-degree murder, which would suggest to me that Curtis Wright Jr. played a more direct role and that he was the one who actually bludgeoned her, Teresa Severs, to death. And even though he said it was Jimmy Ray Rogers who kept delivering the fatal blows, you have to imagine the jury believed it was really him. And there you see, that's Curtis Wright Jr. right there, okay? So again, after these murders. Now, here's after the murder. So here's the thing. He's going to get 25 years in prison, most likely. And yet, it's possible that if Mark Severs is convicted, he could get the death penalty. Do you think that's justice right there? Do you think it's appropriate that the man who set this in motion would get death, but the person who actually hammered her to death would not?
Yes, just in the sense that the person who ended up hammering her to death was motivated mostly by some kind of monetary compensation, whereas the person who set everything in motion was the person that she had chosen to spend her life with. So not a great situation. Whose situation is worse or better? Is it justice? These are all things that are really going to be in the eye of the jury here.
Oh yeah, not an easy case. By the way, just kind of strange. Imagine just being one of these random pedestrians going into the store. Little do you know you're walking by a murderer. It's just a little eerie thought as we're watching the surveillance footage from the Circle K Shell station. Bruce, what's your take? There you go. There he walks right out. Bruce, what's your take on Mark Severs' level of culpability in this?
Well, the law ascribes to a significant level of culpability, a greater level of culpability, the person who pays, who sponsors the crime. They talk about going up the food chain, and it's typically the person who commits the crime is testifying against the person who hired them.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is the way it happens. Whether or not he gets the death penalty, it'll be interesting to see what the jury does, knowing that the person who actually killed the victim won't receive the death penalty. Will the jury say, we don't care, we're going to seek to execute the person who hired him anyway?
This is a case where if they find him guilty, strong signs point to a very strong stance in favor of the death penalty here. This is why it's developed for these kinds of cases. Okay, I think we can jump back live and hear where this is going next.
For the record, I'll play the file labeled Shell Gas Pumps _1.
All right, so more of these eerie surveillance footage. We're going to be seeing probably more of this. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be live. Hey everyone, I'm Jesse Weber, and this is more legal news you can use. Today's topic focuses upon the common issue of when your neighbor's trees cause you problems. So what are your rights? By law, you can trim branches or limbs of a neighbor's tree that extends past the property line. But don't go overboard. You can't chop down the tree. Otherwise, you may have to pay for it. Now, if the tree blocks your view, 1, check if there's a local ordinance. 2, maybe you can enter into an agreement with your neighbor regarding the view. Or 3, see whether your neighbor deliberately and maliciously blocked your view, because you then may have a case. A couple more strange things. Your neighbor not only owns the tree, but the fruit on it too. So technically, you're not allowed to pick fruit off of it. Courts, however, are split about fruit that falls onto your property. Although, honestly, why not just go to a supermarket? Are you really that in need of an apple? Also, you may think your neighbor has to clean up all the leaves from the tree that blow into your yard. Well, you'd be wrong. Leaves are not the owner's responsibility. So instead, try building a fence. Now, your neighbor can be held liable by a court if a tree falls and causes damage to your property, but it all depends on how the tree was maintained and inspected. At the end of the day, it's important to know your rights, but always try speaking with your neighbor first to address the problem. Go to lawandcrime.com for more legal news you can use.
A brain aneurysm doesn't care if you're busy. It doesn't care that you have important meetings. It doesn't care that you have to drop your daughter off at ballet and your son off at soccer practice. And if you ignore the warning signs of a brain aneurysm, you'll realize too late that the meeting wasn't that important. No meeting is. That you'll never see another soccer game, and that your daughter won't see you in the audience at the big recital. So if you suddenly experience the worst headache of your life, sharp pain behind your eye, and blurry vision, don't ignore it. Seek immediate emergency care, because your family is counting on you to take care of you. The Lisa Calagrassi Foundation, shedding light on brain aneurysms. Learn more at lisafoundation.org.
As we constantly talk about privacy today, one of the biggest questions is how do you protect a photo or video of yourself from being used online without your permission? Now, I know you kids love face twittering and instabooking, so let's start with the basic idea that you need to be careful where you post pictures and videos. That means understanding a website's terms of service, because you may be granting a site a license to use your image in ways that you weren't aware of. Also, most legitimate sites will lay out their process to remove material, so you'll want to follow those steps first to get something deleted immediately. But what laws help you to do all this? Here we go, you little legal eagles. Basic rule: you automatically own the copyright in any photo or video you take. Technically, you can go after someone for copyright infringement if your photos or videos are posted or distributed online without your permission. However, under a complicated law called the DMCA, platforms that allow people to post on their sites, such as YouTube, must be provided notice of the infringement before you can properly sue them. Speaking of lawsuits, you may be able to sue someone under state right of privacy or publicity laws. For example, if without your consent, your face or body are being exploited online to sell or promote something, or if there was a photo or video secretly taken of you while you were in private, you may have a very strong case. Go to lawandcrime.com for more legal news you can use.
Do you know the signs of a brain aneurysm? The worst headache of your life, pain behind one eye, dizziness or blurry vision. Don't ignore it. Seek immediate emergency care. The Lisa Calagrassi Foundation. Learn more at lisafoundation.org.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Some incredible surveillance footage is being played right now in the Mark Sievers trial. What you're seeing is footage from a Circle K Shell gas station only a few hours after Teresa Sievers was murdered. So she was murdered on June 28th at around, or after 11:15 p.m. This is at around 3 a.m. the next day. And what you're seeing is Rogers and Wright Jr. at this station. And we played it earlier. It's pretty incredible, just Wright Jr. walking in, walking out, not a big deal, making their trip back to Missouri, and yet it was only a few hours later that they bludgeoned a woman to death with hammers in her own home. And also, I said this earlier, pretty remarkable that what you're seeing are all these other people coming in, and they don't realize who these people are. They don't realize who they're standing next to. Now, Bruce, you were making a point that maybe the prosecution should have presented this differently.
Well, look, this has been going on for a number of minutes already.
It's quiet. Also, it's silent. You don't hear anything.
Right. So the jurors are just sitting there watching this, and it's not particularly interesting, and it's not particularly poignant for the proof in the case. What I would have done if I was the prosecutor is put the whole exhibit in. Everybody can look at it if they want to. Then take snippets out where you have Rogers and Wright coming in and doing whatever it is you want to show them. Show that for 30 seconds and keep moving. We have to remember we're in a TV, error where jurors are expecting things to move quickly, and to the extent that you can play to that, you ought to, because it's going to help your case. And in this case, it's obviously going to help you with the judge too.
Yeah, look, jurors, human beings too, they pay attention, they don't pay attention. You hope they're like a sponge and they retain everything, but that's just not how it works. You have to really hook them. Now, that witness was just excused. We're waiting for another witness to come forward. Dinora, as we look at this, I mean, how cold-blooded can Curtis Wright be that he's just walking in his little shorts and he's leaving and is, again, murdered somebody a few hours earlier. One of the things that we talked about earlier is how similar he looks to the defendant. And that also became an interesting point to understand the relationship. However, when we saw Mark Sievers in this trial, he actually shaved. So this is what he looked like before. He shaved. Is that a deliberate move to make himself not appear like Curtis Wright, to separate himself from that cold-blooded killer, separate himself from the man we just saw in that surveillance footage, coldly walking in and out of a convenience store after murdering a woman? You think that's deliberate what he did there?
Sure. I mean, you certainly want to do everything you can to disassociate the defendant from the witnesses that are essentially trying to establish he was involved. So let's hope that it was a deliberate and good move by his attorneys to say you should shave your beard.
He still looks a lot like him.
Sure.
I mean, and even his attorney looks a lot like him. There's some interesting things that are happening here. Okay, I'm getting word that we can jump back live. A new witness is on the stand, and we're going to go live and see who this is and how this witness plays into the overall case.
Field support person, do you work in a racetrack store or in a regional office of some kind?
Yeah, well, both. We're remote, so we work mostly out of the stores.
And as regional support, what are your duties, sir?
To monitor the stores, handle all employee issues, handle any kind of theft or any kind of issues that happen in these stores.
And do your duties include keeping track of surveillance videos from your stores within your region?
Yes, sir.
And specifically with regards to a racetrack in Brooksville, is that part of your region?
Yes, at the time, yes, that's part of our region here in racetrack in South Florida. That's part of the region.
And does that location have a video surveillance system?
Yes, it does. It has Gulf Coast DVR.
And what's the purpose of keeping a surveillance system in the store?
Many issues for protection of the employees, also to use for local authorities to use for, if they have any use for it as well.
And as the regional support person, do you maintain access to those videos from the DVRs in the stores?
Yes, sir. Also our corporate.
Okay, and are those videos from the stores maintained in the normal course of business?
Yes, sir.
And are they recorded, are they made at or near the time that the things happening on them are happening?
Yes, they're on time. They're at current time at all times.
And how are these video recordings stored?
They're stored through our DVR system, through our company called Gulf Coast Video. They're stored for at least 6 months at a time.
And as a regional support supervisor, do you have access to those videos?
Yes, we do.
Does anyone have access to them?
No, not anyone.
The access is controlled?
Yes, it is.
What's the purpose of controlling access to videos from the store?
Well, I think it's a legal issue with us, and also with making sure that they can't be tampered at any time.
And as a regional support supervisor, do you also have opportunities to review the video surveillance systems within the stores in your region to make sure they're working properly?
Yes, we do.
Specifically regarding Brooksville, when you review the surveillance systems in your locations, do you have an opportunity to check the time on the equipment and make sure that the time is correct?
Yes, we verify that.
Why is it important for the equipment to have the correct time?
To make sure that we're getting accurate data.
And do you check the equipment to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with?
Yes, we do.
Is the equipment maintained in a secure location within the store?
Yes, it is. At the manager's, right in the back of the manager's desk.
And the company that stores your videos for you, is that company secure?
Yes, it is.
And if you need to access the video, are you able to access the video yourself?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 71A and B, previously been shown to the defense. And ask you if you recognize, first start with 71A. There's a little label on the back here.
Right.
71A and 71B.
Yes, one's a dumb drive. Yep, from Storekeeper, one of the applications we use to monitor our stores, and one is from Gulf Coast Video to DVD download.
And you previously had an opportunity.
Okay, so this appears to be surveillance footage from this racetrack, I believe earlier than the Circle K Shell station, again, establishing a roadmap for these people. But again, the past 2 days, I'm going to ask this question again to you, Bruce. The past 2 days have been so much about Rogers and Wright. Understandably so, they have to prove this case. But we haven't heard about Sievers. And I wonder, the more time that elapses where we don't hear the name Sievers, we don't see Mark Sievers, does the jury kind of, again, we brought it back before, they don't remember everything, they try to pay attention as much as they can, do you lose them?
I think they might be losing them here for some of the reasons I mentioned before, which is they're just playing these surveillance videos without any point to it. No one's narrating it. They're not highlighting anything. They're not narrowing it down to or focusing in on the conduct of the two individuals that just murdered a woman. But in some ways, it's helpful to the prosecution because what they're doing is they're sort of putting the jury to sleep. We got this. There's no dispute. Everything we've told you is absolutely true. The defense doesn't even have any questions from most of our witnesses. There's nothing they can dispute here. We know what happened. And in that sense, the jury's going to go back and say, well, what are we doing? Let's just vote and we're done.
Well, I'm sure the jury is thinking about the defense, every aspect of this case. One of the things I'm not clear about, maybe you're more clear about this, Nora, because you're much smarter than I am, is have you heard what the defense's rationale would be for why Curtis Wright would have done this on his own? We know what the prosecution says. We know that they say Mark Sievers hired him. And yet, when they had an opportunity to cross-examine Curtis Wright, when they had an opportunity to present their case in an opening statement, I didn't get a strong, clear sense of why Curtis Wright would have taken Jimmy Ray Rogers and brought him down there, and they would have killed Teresa Sievers. Did you have a clear understanding of that?
No, I would have to agree with you. They haven't really established any additional motive for him independent of Mark Sievers recruiting him to do this.
Bruce, have you heard anything?
Well, there was a hint to it, right? They offered some evidence that Wright got money from Mrs. Sievers,
right,
that he was paid by her. So I think what they're going to end up doing with this is suggest that this was a robbery and that as a result of the robbery, she surprised them, they killed her, and it wasn't this murder for hire plot.
Well, it makes sense because they didn't come with any weapons and they said they tripped over something and then just took whatever was the nearest weapon there. Maybe that works. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll be live.
This week on the Law and Crime Network, Mark Sievers, husband, business partner, and accused killer of his doctor wife, Teresa Sievers, who a co-worker found beaten to death with a hammer in her own home. Sievers faces the possible death penalty because authorities say he was the ringleader who asked his friend Curtis Wright and Wright's friend Jimmy Rogers to help kill the doctor. Wright pleaded guilty and helped secure a conviction against Rogers by testifying against him. Now he's expected to testify against Sievers. Join us for the nation's biggest criminal cases.
I'm Dan Abrams, and this is the Law and Crime Network.
Hey everybody, I'm Jesse Weber, and this is legal news you can use. So you ever watch a soap opera and the issue comes up about the wealthy patriarch not leaving anything in his will to his wife or kids? Well, if you haven't, then clearly you are watching quality television like me, but it gets you thinking. Can you disinherit your spouse or children? Let's start with the kids. In almost all states, you don't have to leave your adult children anything. It's pretty surprising, right? However, this doesn't mean all kids. You usually can't disinherit minor children, and in Louisiana, you not only can't disinherit those under 23, but also those who don't have the mental capacity to take care of themselves. Oh, and of course, this also doesn't include if a court orders you to leave them something, like, say, in a divorce. But if you really want to disinherit your adult children, and remember, don't make that decision lightly, you'll have to make sure you have a will or some kind of estate plan. Because if you don't, and you don't have a surviving spouse, guess what? Generally, the law says your stuff is going to your kids. Now, what about your wife or husband? Well, this is where it gets tricky. Most states say you can't intentionally disinherit your spouse unless he or she agrees, usually in a pre- or post-nuptial agreement. Okay, then you're asking, what is your other half entitled to? Depends on the state. Some look at how long you're married, if you had children together, and if there are any assets that need to be probated. Look, this can get complicated and messy, so as with everything, consult with an attorney first. For more legal news you can use, go to lawandcrime.com.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov, a public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Welcome back, everybody. We're live right now in the Mark Sievers trial, the man accused of plotting the murder of his wife, Dr. Teresa Sievers. And over the past 2 days, it hasn't so much been about Mark Sievers as it has been about the two people that were hired to ultimately kill her, his best friend, Curtis Wainwright Jr., and the man that he recruited, Jimmy Ray Rogers. What we're seeing today is the digital footprint that they left. Surveillance footage showing their trip from Missouri to Florida, and that's what's being displayed to the jury at this point. A new witness just jumped on the stand, Donald Fellwell. He's from the Lee County Sheriff's Office, and we'll hear more about this investigation.
In the stores or gas stations.
And where did you go?
I went to a racetrack, store number 451 in Brooksville, Florida, to retrieve video.
And did you actually retrieve video from the store 451 racetrack?
Yes, sir, I did.
Where else did you go?
I went to Ocala, Gainesville, Ruskin, Lake Panaskowski, a couple other locations.
Now, that's a long way away from here. How was it that you ended up all the way up in Ocala and Gainesville looking for video?
Well, I got an email from then Sergeant Labide with a list of places that needed to go for video retrieval.
And were you the only deputy dispatched north looking for videos, or were there other folks that were also looking for videos?
At the time, my partner, Weta Francis, also retrieved videos.
And Miss Francis, did you go together to get videos, or did she go other places?
No, she covered everything from Tampa South. I covered everything from Tampa North.
And when you say everything from Tampa North to where?
To Gainesville.
Okay. And did anybody go north of Gainesville, as far as you know?
Not that I'm aware of.
So as far as you're aware, between you and Miss Weta Francis, you had from Fort Myers to Gainesville covered locating videos.
Yes, sir.
You recall how many places you went to yourself?
I would guess probably 10 or 12.
At the time you went to those 10 to 12 places, did you have any idea of whether any suspects or subjects would be located on those videos?
No, sir. I just had a list of locations to go to and dates and times to retrieve video.
And regarding Miss Francis was one of the folks, she's a civilian in your unit?
Yes, sir.
And the time she went to the places between here and Tampa, did y'all have any idea of whether or not there'd be any subjects located on those places between here and Tampa?
No, sir. We just had a request to retrieve video.
You wanted to retrieve the video and then have the detectives look them over?
That's correct.
Your Honor, we tendered the witness. Thank you, sir.
Defense.
No questions, Your Honor.
Is this witness to be released or retained?
He's released, Your Honor. He may go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You're free to go.
Okay, so that was Donald Fuel, who's leaving the stand right now. I guess, Dinora, where do we go next for the prosecution? Who are you waiting to see testify? Would it be possibly the testimony of Curtis Wainwright Jr.'s wife? Because that would be pretty interesting to hear.
Oh, certainly, considering, part of the fact that he wasn't answering his phone and they were supposed to be in constant contact, and that seems to be indicating that he was doing something suspicious, would certainly be interesting to hear from her.
And Bruce, we heard a little bit about her during the testimony of Curtis Wainwright because there was an idea, well, did you just take this plea deal because you wanted to protect your wife? And the prosecution made it very clear, just because whatever you say, there's no protection for her, and let alone she seems to be probably innocent throughout all of this, but the defense was trying to show this level of bias that he loves his wife and is trying to protect his wife, and that's why he's now testifying against Mr. Sievers. What do you think about that?
I think the defense is groping around for some other motive besides the obvious one. Wright was hired by Sievers to kill Sievers' wife. Whether or not that works for the defense remains to be seen, but arguing that he's lying and pointing the finger to Sievers in order to protect his wife is kind of far-fetched. The most obvious thing is he's lying to protect him. Wright's lying to protect Wright. Wright knows he's caught red-handed, and that's one thing that I think the defense will do here. They'll take the overwhelming evidence of Wright and Rogers' guilt and say, Wright had nowhere to go. Wright was caught. Wright was at the house at the time of the murder. We know that from the GPS devices. We look what happened with his wife, and we know he was caught. What's he going to do? He's either going to face the death penalty or he's going to make a deal. And he has to make a deal, so he points to Sievers.
No, I get it, and that seems to be where the defense went when they had an opportunity to cross-examine him. It seems the defense, though, do you think they're doing a strong enough job at this point? Because by all accounts, when they had an opportunity to interview, to cross-examine the state's star witness, they seemed to be a little all over the place. They were jumping from point to point to point to point, and I don't know if it was that cohesive. I'm curious, where do you think the defense is going to go next? Because do you think that they've presented a strong case?
I mean, at this point, they seem to be trying to poke holes in the narrative that the prosecution is trying to generate here with all this evidence. They don't seem to be focusing very much on the more technical witnesses that are being provided. But I mean, at the same time, it's going to be part of the jury's perception of whether they seem to be doing enough.
Well, we do know that Curtis Wainwright Jr. was subject to recall by the defense, so they may call him as their own witness later on when it's their turn to present their case. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, it's going to be more live testimony. A digital forensic expert just jumped on the stand. So we're moving through the prosecution's case and seeing where they're going to go next in the trial of Mark Sievers, the man accused of plotting the murder of his wife. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this.
My name is Sam Leitch. About a year ago, I had a heart transplant. My life was saved on the last day that I was supposed to be on this planet. I don't know who my donor was, but that person saved my life. And now I know what a miracle feels like. It feels terrific. Having a new heart's given me time to spend more time with my loved ones, watching them grow up. That new heart gave me a new mission in life, and that is to get others to sign up to be organ and tissue donors. The most common thing I hear when I ask people why they haven't signed up is, I don't know, I just haven't thought about it. Well, why don't you think about it? Think about the life you might save or the life you might enhance. Over 130 million people have already signed up to be an organ, eye, or tissue donor. They're men and women, all ages, all races, and they have one thing in common. They want to save lives. Please sign up to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You don't want to miss your chance to save a life.
Hey everyone, I'm Jesse Weber, and this is legal news you can use. The internet can be a complicated place for many different reasons, but one of the questions that seems to always confuse people is, can I use a photo or image that I find online? Let's discuss. Okay, so first, copyrights. Copyrights are all the exclusive rights that someone has in an original work that he or she created, including images. How they're distributed, seen, copied, and otherwise used is up to the copyright owner. Generally, if you created the image, you automatically own the copyright in it. Pretty cool, right? What this means is that you usually need the permission of the copyright owner before using the image. However, ask yourself the following. Are you planning to use the image sparingly, or maybe only a portion of it? Are you not going to make money off of it? Are you using it in a news reporting, educational, or scholarly context that benefits the public? Are you completely changing the image so it's unrecognizable? Are you transforming the meaning of the image, like using it in a parody? Is it impossible to get the permission of the copyright owner? Well, if your answer is yes to some or all of these questions, then you may be able to use it without permission, but that's not always guaranteed. Also, sometimes images no longer are copyright protected, meaning they're in the public domain, or the owner grants something called a Creative Commons license, allowing others to freely use the image in specific ways. There are websites that offer royalty-free stock images as well. You should look into all that too. Copyrights aside, if the image features a logo or slogan, or a person, particularly a celebrity, then other issues could come into play as well, including trademark, privacy, and right of publicity laws. I told you, complicated. So best practice is to get permission or give credit whenever you can before using an image, particularly on social media. For more legal news you can use, go to lawandcrime.com.
Can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, no thanks, not my thing.
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Do you know the signs of a brain aneurysm? The worst headache of your life? Pain behind one eye? Dizziness or blurry vision? Don't ignore it. Seek immediate emergency care. The Lisa Calagrassi Foundation. Learn more at lisafoundation.org.